Therese Fowler says, "Point of view is a matter that readers rarely pay attention to, yet it's one of the most important story decisions an author makes." The problem is, because we rarely pay attention to it as readers, it's easy for new writers to forget point of view entirely. Point of view literally means the place from which you view something, and it influences your perspective. What you can see if you're standing on top of a mountain is different from what you can see if you're down in the valley. Most new writers make the mistake of always watching from the top of the mountain and never going down into the valley where their characters live. They have a godlike point of view, which is called third-person omniscient, because it implies the author knows everything about the world of the story. The Harry Potter books are written from third-person omniscient point of view. Consider this passage from the Sorcerer's Stone. "A breeze ruffled the neat hedges of Privet Drive, which lay silent and tidy under the inky sky, the very last place you would expect astonishing things to happen. Harry Potter rolled over inside his blankets without waking up. One small hand closed on the letter beside him, and he slept on, not knowing that he was special, not knowing he was famous, not knowing he would be woken in a few hours' time by Mrs. Dursley's scream as she opened the front door to put out the milk bottles, nor that he would spend the next few weeks being prodded and pinched by his cousin Dudley. He couldn't know that at this very moment people meeting in secret all over the country were holding up their glasses and saying in hushed voices, 'To Harry Potter, the boy who lived.' Harry couldn't know that people were toasting to him. He couldn't know anything because he was a baby and he was asleep. So how does the reader know all of this? It's because the author writes from an omniscient point of view, which makes us feel a bit like gods, able to move with the wind, able to see the future, able to see what is happening all around the country at the same time we are looking at baby Harry asleep in his blankets. Most new writers automatically use third-person omniscient point of view in their stories. This point of view is especially popular in fantasy because its godlike perspective creates a sense of destiny or fate. The problem is that third-person omniscient point of view is hard to write well, especially if the writer is doing it automatically without being conscious of it. To give our readers a deep experience of a story and to create empathy with the characters, standing on top of the mountain may not be enough. Take, for example, this sentence written in third-person omniscient. "The sun was bright, but the trees provided plenty of shade." This sentence begins by telling us an obvious fact. Everyone knows the sun is bright. The sentence is also impersonal. We have no idea who the characters are or where they are. Worst of all, the sentence pulls us away from the characters. Instead of walking in the forest, we feel more like God sitting in heaven where the sun is bright, looking down on the forest where there is shade. Let's try a new point of view. Instead of third-person omniscient, we'll make this third-person limited. A limited point of view means we have to stick with the characters. We can't know something the characters don't know, and we can't go somewhere the characters can't go. Now, let's revise our sentence. Points of sunlight flashed through the canopy of leaves. This sentence gives us the same information, but from a limited point of view. We are no longer up in the clouds with the gods looking down on the forest. We are under the trees with the characters, looking up at the canopy of leaves. Instead of dealing with obvious facts like the sun being bright or the trees providing shade, we experience these facts as sensations, as flashing points of light. We don't know who the characters are yet, but we know where they are. And this is the secret to understanding point of view. A reader's point of view is the sense of who am I and where am I in the story. To create this sense in the reader, the writer must also have a strong point of view. A writer's point of view is the sense of who is telling the story and what do they know. We'll learn more about that in a moment, but first let's examine one more point of view called first person. First person is always limited. It can never be omniscient because it means that we are seeing the story through the eyes of one of the characters, thinking only what they think, feeling only what they feel, and knowing only what they know. The Hunger Games is written from first-person point of view. Consider this passage from the first book. He tilts his forehead down to rest against mine and pulls me closer. His skin, his whole being radiates heat from being so near the fire, and I close my eyes, soaking in his warmth. I breathe in the smell of snow-dampened leather and smoke and apples, the smell of all those wintry days we shared before the games. I don't try to move away. Why should I, anyway? His voice drops to a whisper. I love you. That's why. Remember, the reader's point of view is the sense of who am I and where am I in the story. Here, the reader is Katniss Everdeen. The reader is where she is next to Peeta. The reader thinks what Katniss thinks, smells what she smells, and feels her anxiety about love. This is first-person perspective, and to write it, the author has to be conscious of who is telling the story and what do they know. Since Katniss is telling the story, she will always use the pronouns I, me, myself. If you're writing in English, remember that pronouns are very important for establishing point of view. And if you're writing from the limited perspective, remember that you can only reveal what the characters know. If the next paragraph in this story explained what President Snow was doing in his palace, the reader's immersion would be broken. We would no longer feel like I am Katniss Everdeen. A reader's point of view is the sense of who am I and where am I in the story. If I feel like I am a character in the story, that's first-person point of view. If I am somewhere outside the characters, like an invisible friend, that's third-person point of view. First person is always limited, meaning I go where my character goes and think what my character thinks. Third person can be either limited or omniscient. There is also a point of view called second person, which uses the you pronoun and is always limited. Second person is rarely used in writing, so we won't cover it today. To create a sense of point of view in the reader, the writer must ask who is telling the story and what do they know. Most new writers automatically use the godlike third-person omniscient point of view, but trying another point of view can give readers a deeper experience and allow greater empathy with characters. It's also important to note that third-person limited has different varieties to choose from. You can write only what the characters are doing. You can write what one character is doing and what that character thinks. You can write what 2 or 3 characters are doing and what they think, provided they stay together. Ursula Le Guin's book, Steering the Craft, has great examples of the different varieties of point of view. I recommend purchasing a copy and experimenting to find the point of view that works best for your story. Now let's do a very simple experiment to show how one story feels from different points of view. Here is third-person omniscient, a point of view which gives us access to all information relevant to the story. Sophia was walking down the street when she saw Jenny. Sophia had met Jenny at the cinema during the premiere of Annabelle, but she had been so scared that night she could not recall Jenny's face. Jenny recognized Sophia, however, and hated her for screaming and crying throughout the movie, even during the credits. Let's write it again from third-person limited point of view. Sophia was walking down the street when she saw Jenny. At first, she did not recognize Jenny's face. Had she seen her at the party on Saturday? No, that wasn't right. Here we go where Sophia goes and we know what Sophia thinks, but we can't see the past or know what Jenny is thinking. We are limited to Sophia's perspective. But this also makes us feel closer to Sophia as a character, and it creates an air of mystery about Jenny. Now, let's write this passage from first-person point of view. As I'm walking, I'm struck by a pair of brown eyes shaded under blonde bangs. Where have I seen those eyes before, and why are they avoiding mine? I probably shouldn't have had so many drinks at the party on Saturday. I always forget people at parties. But if we met at a party, why do I feel a chill when I look at her? Third-person point of view can tell us what Sophia is thinking, but first-person actually allows us to hear her internal monologue. We have a sharper sense of perception, meaning we don't just see what Sophia sees, we notice what she notices. First person gets us very deep into the life of Sophia, but the disadvantage is that if there's something important that Sophia doesn't notice, we'll simply miss it. First person, third person limited, third person omniscient. Which point of view is right for your story? When you make a decision and remain conscious of it, you can write a great story from any point of view. Thank you for joining me in this introduction to point of view. Now let's practice what we've learned as we continue our journey to become a writer in 31 days.